everybody, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show on the 23rd of October, 2019. It's 7:03 Eastern Time, and I put myself in the middle today. I'll see how that works. So welcome aboard. I hope everybody had a great day on what was a little out of focus there. A bit of a was an absolutely spectacular day across the eastern part of the U.S., and it is going to continue on Thursday. Just want to give everybody a quick reminder. You have the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app on Google Play and on the App Store. You have Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman. Both are free. The Angry Weatherman is only available for Android at the moment, but hopefully soon it will be available for iPhones. And for those of you who have the Joe Chaffee app, just make sure that you have the updated version, because we did update the app a couple of months ago, and there have been some changes. One of the things I added back, we had them last year, and they're back this year, and I may add a few more maps along the way. But on the home page, if you scroll down, you will find every National Weather Service snowfall forecast map from Maine all the way down into South Carolina. Now, granted, the ones that are further south aren't used very often, but nonetheless, they're there for easy access, and those maps update automatically as the Weather Service updates their snowfall forecast this winter. You will be able to access them easily, all on one tab there on the home page. Again, just scroll down and you'll see them. They're all in big zeros right now, obviously, although the New York one hasn't been updated since the last time it was used back in April, so it's actually showing less than an inch in some of the inland areas in the Hudson Valley. It's from last year, just in case you were wondering. And also, just a quick reminder for those of you who are interested in a more intensive weather experience, and certainly is going to get that way this winter with snowstorms and everything else that we'll be dealing with. You do have my weather platform on Patreon. And it's a subscription platform. It's just $2 a month. If you have need for more extensive weather information, need a little more hand-holding, there are some higher tiers that are available. Kathleen Trudy, thank you so much. Hitting Super Chat tonight early, and I really appreciate it greatly. You had a beautiful day in Madison, New Jersey, a double espresso for me. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Most appreciated here. And of course, those of you, while I'm doing the weather, I can't always see what you guys are saying unless I pop the screen up back and forth, and it's a little difficult to do sometimes, to do the maps and to bring the screen up at the same time. So just bear that in mind. If you do have questions when we're done with the weather part, you if you're still there, just make sure you ask them again if I did not address them. All right, so let's take a look at what was a really beautiful day today. I'm going to start with the U.S. satellite tonight. And we are, of course, nice and clear. Maine today got into some really big rains, and that was left over from last night's low that ran northeastward in cold front. And of course, we talked about last night the redeveloping low on the point of occlusion, that the areas that were going to catch that redevelopment were going to be in the areas up in northeastern New York through northern New England, and particularly over Maine. And the rain was very heavy late last night and this morning, but that has now, of course, pulled out to the northeast, although there's still some leftover clouds up in northeastern Maine. Otherwise, it was just delightful all the way down the coast, down into the Carolinas and Georgia and through the Gulf states. Now, we are starting to see the beginnings of the next weather system that we're going to be dealing with over the weekend, and that is that cloud mass that you see down in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Let's keep an eye on this, because it is possible that we could get another tropical or subtropical or a hybrid system that will develop there in the next couple of days. That is going to be the seedling that's going to hook up with the trough that you see pushing down now in through the northern Rockies. And we do actually have some winter storm warnings up for parts of Colorado. I was looking at some of the snow amounts forecast. Denver actually forecasting for 2 inches of snow out of this, and it looks like a general 2 to 6 inch snowfall with 6 inch plus snows occurring in the foothills to the south of Denver. So it was quite. This is a little system, but it is producing a small area of some winter weather that might actually extend down into parts of North Texas. Amarillo could see a few flakes, might even see a few flakes as far south as Lubbock. But that's going to hook up with this moisture and this possible low that could form there in the southwest Gulf and then eventually run up northeastward. It's going to impact our weather in the northeast and mid-Atlantic and back through the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley and the Tennessee Valley and the Gulf states this weekend. And then after that, as we go into next week, there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of how the whole pattern is going to play out next week. Models are bringing down some colder air. However, we have a number of the models actually trying to, at least initially, drop it more to the west before it swings it eastward, and then the colder air would arrive late next week. The GFS continues to insist that it's going to be arriving for late Tuesday night, Wednesday, and beyond into next weekend, as it just kind of overwhelms cold air. It really has to do with how it handles the vortex in Canada that's coming down, whether it drops back westward first before it swings east, or does it strengthen as it moves southeast into the eastern half of Canada and just basically overwhelms the eastern part of the United States with cold air. So it's all part of the puzzle in trying to figure all this out. Watches and warnings, we don't have a whole lot tonight, but what we do have are frost advisories in southwestern Virginia and even in a few of the counties heading up toward the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, and a small area there in north central Maryland. Also, western North Carolina, we have frost advisories up there. Mirtha Gunter, I don't know if she's on tonight, but she's under a frost advisory. And in eastern Kentucky and in a few counties there in central West Virginia. You see the winter weather advisories that are up for a handful of counties in North Texas and in northeastern New Mexico. The winter storm warnings that are in Colorado, mainly in that narrow band there from Denver on south. Denver's actually in a winter weather advisory. And we have some advisories and some wind issues up in northern Montana, part of that upper trough coming down. And in California, particularly up in north central California northward, where we have red flag warnings. They're having another situation there with winds and possible planned power outages in order to reduce any kind of wildfire risk. So that is playing out. It's not a statewide phenomena that's going on with this setup. It's that area that is running from, basically draw a line from San Francisco to about Reno and then go north and west of there, and that's where you have your red flag warnings. Not too much else going on everywhere. As we look around, it's pretty quiet. We don't have any severe weather tonight. SPC is not indicating any severe weather risk for the rest of today and for tonight. Now here's WPC's rainfall forecast map, and you can obviously see the Gulf influence here with the big rains that are indicated with the moisture coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, eastern Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, into Alabama, much of Tennessee, into Kentucky, all in an area showing rainfall amounts of 3 to 5 inches, and we have a 2 to 3 inch finger of rain that extends through Ohio, across all of Pennsylvania, Maryland, northwestern West Virginia, the northern half of New Jersey to New York City, and southern New England. So the WPC people bullish with the rainfall. Now, bear in mind that what we may be seeing, at least from Pennsylvania eastward, could be a combination of what happens Saturday night and Sunday, and then perhaps Tuesday into Wednesday, because as this cold air arrives into the east, there's probably going to be another front and another wave that's going to develop on it and move northward and bring rain before the colder air sweeps in. At least if you believe in the world of the GFS. If you believe in the European, that may happen, but it may have to wait more till later Wednesday or maybe even Thursday, because of the fact that the European wants to drop the trough so far out to the west. The Hurricane Center is actually talking about on their latest tropical weather outlook, and if I'm still gabbing at 8 o'clock tonight, we can see what they say on the new one. I doubt that they're going to say much more than what they already have, but they do point out this area of disturbed weather, the tropical wave that is over the Yucatan Peninsula at the moment, and they say that they're giving it a 10% chance of developing in the next 48 hours, a 30% chance over the next 5 days, saying in their discussion that some development is possible Friday and early Saturday. Eventually, if anything forms from there, it would seem likely that we're going to get that to merge with the trough that's coming down and the developing non-tropical low that's going to form out of what's happening in the Gulf states. Although the NAM offers a very interesting perspective with all of this. So I'm going to start off with we'll start with the upper air and take a look at what's going on. So here we are at for this evening, and of course now we have this upper high that is building oh so nicely in the off the east coast, off the southeast coast of the U.S., and you can see it right here. There's your upper high, and that is not building all the way up, so it's not like we have a heat wave high here. We've got this kind of gentle southwest or west-southwest flow that is running from the southern plains right over us. So the air over us is seasonal to a little bit above average for this time of year. Average high in New York City this time of year is about 64, 65-ish, I believe, and trending down. My number may be just a little bit high. I'm just kind of doing it off the top of my head. By the time we get to November 1st, that average high is down into the low 60s or closer to 60. But you do have troughing here that is swinging through. We have no real serious issues to worry about for tomorrow or into Friday, because this upper high off the East Coast does build a little bit. It's centered off the Florida coast, off the North Carolina coast. So the surface high is going to be moving off the mid-Atlantic coastline and kind of holding in. You can see the next trough that's dropping down with this upper low that's in North Texas. So you've got a lot of cold air aloft, certainly. And there's a northern short wave that is evident moving into the western lakes. The northern shortwave is going to separate from the system in the south. They're not phased, so you have the GFS now catching up to the idea, and I thought that maybe that this would wind up being the flatter, weaker look that the GFS had. So naturally, it goes to what the European and some of the other models had yesterday, which is a more vigorous upper low that comes out and moves further to the west. At least that's what it seems. The flow is kind of split, because you've got that upper low, driving this trough down into the western Gulf, and this is our jet stream for Friday night. So if we get some kind of low that develops out here, it's going to move probably northeastward. Even if we don't get that low, bear in mind that you've got all this tropical moisture that is down in the southwest Gulf, so it's going to respond to the flow of the upper low up in near Dallas, and you're going to see all that moisture being drawn up to the northeast. So it's really no shocker that you've got WPC doing what it's doing with the rainfall. It makes total sense because of all that injection of that tropical moisture with the tropical wave. Now, as we go through Saturday, we're still holding this ridge here along the east coast. The ridge line is right about New York City. on Saturday afternoon. I tend to think that the daytime on Saturday in the Northeast is going to be okay. It's not going to necessarily be picture perfect, but it is. I think the rain is going to hold off a bit. You're starting to see that southern upper low weaken a bit and move and get kicked away to the northeast just as the next trough is dropping down into the northern plains. So this basically kicks this system out and moves it along. So we lift that up. The short wave is still there. It's not as well defined. Obviously, it's losing that the upper low part disappears, so it's basically an open trough and short wave, while this next trough is dropping southeastward and remaining rather strong. The upper high along the east coast is now much further offshore. The ridge line is now well to the east, so we're at early Sunday morning. This is where I think there will probably start to see rain spreading in through the northern mid-Atlantic and into southern New England. We're going to have one of these warm fronts, okay, and that's going to create raw onshore conditions. I'm thinking at least from Delaware and Maryland northeastward initially, and then we'll have to see if that warm front pushes north, or is this going to be one of those cases where the warm front never really moves very much, and we get stuck in those raw conditions through much of the day on Sunday. Once that gets out of the way, we get a break on Monday, but here's where we start to see the models diverge a bit. The GFS with the trough early next week begins to drop it down into the plains and down into New Mexico. The jet gets pretty far south here. It gets down into the northwestern Gulf. That trough swings around and really amplifies as it makes its way toward the north to the east. It gradually develops sort of a bowl look. It just drops in. There's no sharpness to it as we get into the middle part of the week, and it swings to the east. So this is all cold air that is coming down around it, and it just overwhelms everybody east of the Rockies. Just basically gets overwhelmed by this cold air. And let me just say right now. Let me clarify something. Because this discussion came up on my on a Facebook post earlier today, that when I say cold, okay, don't automatically assume that we're talking snow cold or winter cold. This is air that is going to bring temperatures that are going to be 10 or more degrees below average in some places. So this time of year, if your average high is 60 and you don't get out of the 40s or only get to about 50, that's cold for this time of year. So when I say, that's what I mean, okay? People tend to read into things, and I had one person come at me with the fact that, for using the word cold, that I was implying something else, and I'm not. And I can't help what people read into things, but this is what I mean. If I'm talking about cold air, it's relative to normal. So it all depends on the time of year. If we're in the 20s and 30s in January, that's seasonal. I wouldn't necessarily call that cold. It'll just be seasonal. If it gets down into the teens and single digits or below zero, that's cold. Okay, so I think we got that straightened out. All right, so here's your upper trough in the east, and now we're going through next week. It just kind of stays there in the east. It begins to finally pull out late in the week. It pulls out to a certain extent. Then you get another trough that tries to drop in from Canada for next week. And so it keeps it, we moderate a bit, but it doesn't warm up very quickly. Now, we've got differences, obviously. So I'm going to set this to Wednesday at 8 a.m. And I'm going to draw in the contours here so you can see the difference between this and the European. So here's how the GFS basically has the upper air with the jet stream, and now I'm going to I'll switch it over to the European so you can see the difference. And the European has been doing this now for a couple of days, where it drops this trough into the west. And look at the difference between the two models. The European is the tropical tidbits map that is up there in the background for the same time frame. Okay, if the difference here is that somebody is going to wind up getting some snow from a developing low in the plains that's going to be running up toward the Great Lakes in this scenario. And here in the east, we're actually going to be dry and on the warm side of average because a ridge pops up along the east coast on the European. The European, to give you an idea of the flow on the European, it matches up to the GFS relatively well once we get to Saturday. Okay, so here's the GFS on Saturday. Oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Sorry about that. So here's the GFS on Saturday, and now here's the GFS. I'm sorry, here's the European on Saturday. The European actually is maybe a little more vigorous with the upper low in the southern stream. They both have the troughs coming into the northern plains and the northern Rockies and swinging down, so they're relatively close. Then as we get into Monday, this is where you start to see the big differences, because the GFS on Monday at this point is already swinging this trough eastward. The biggest difference is that the European, and this may not be correct, the European takes the southern part of this trough, drops it down into the southwest. Now, we saw the GFS try to do this about a week or so ago on one of the longer range runs, and for this week, and it didn't, actually a couple of weeks ago, and it never happened. Okay, so I have to wonder about whether it's correct in dropping the upper low so far down into the southwest like that into Nevada and California, and then, because it does that, there's another spoke of energy in that northern trough that swings down, phases with that southern stream energy. So suddenly you've got, again, look at where the GFS is going to wind up to this. This is what the European is doing, which is totally different. There's that open low that comes out of the southwest, now swings over into eastern Colorado and West Texas. And again, out of this, you're probably going to have some kind of low that develops in the southern or central plains and then runs up to the northeast. All of this cold air is driving southward down through the Rockies into the southern Rockies and into West Texas with the trough that far to the west. Here in the east, you've got this upper high, and of course, here we are on Tuesday, nice weather, on the mild side of average, and then eventually as we go through next week, it finally late in the week swings the trough through here. But this would have a cold front instead of Tuesday night, Wednesday. You'd have a cold front approaching during the day on Thursday, and if you get a situation like this, you could actually see temperatures probably climb up into the 60s to near 70 ahead of that cold front before it moves on through. And then you get the colder air that comes in behind it, which would get here for Friday and for Saturday. In fact, by Friday morning, the upper trough's already long through, so this front probably comes through here midday on Thursday, earlier midday on Thursday, and then we get colder Thursday night, Friday into Friday night. Big differences with regards to how the models are handling this. The GFS for the same time frame on Friday night, they suddenly get closer again. They're not quite the same because by Friday morning, the GFS has already pulled the first upper low out, and it's got a second arm that's dropping in, and then you've got the GFS does, and then the European is still dealing with that first main upper low that's wrapped up in southeastern Canada with a troughing that's back out in the northern plains. So the differences for next week are big in terms of which way this will play. I could cynically say that I'm going to go kind of lean more. I think the GFS loves to overwhelm cold air, so that part of it may be wrong, and maybe the European is perhaps too deep out in the west. So that part of it, from the European standpoint, may be wrong. So perhaps a compromise between the two is in order. and I think the icon model might be somewhat of that, a bit maybe that compromise. It does drop energy down in the southwest, but it's not nearly as vigorous as what the European has, and then it swings down the trough into North Dakota, and this would, at least from the standpoint of the icon, when we look at the surface map here, this is for Monday afternoon, which is far out as it goes, but if we go back to the earlier run, we can go a little bit further. You will notice, as I said, Monday, it's fine. The next front is setting up for Tuesday night, Wednesday, along the eastern seaboard, and that might be, I think, perhaps that's the compromise that you would get between the two models. The GFS would have this coming in faster. The European has it the slowest, and the furthest west. The icon looks like it's somewhere in the middle. Take your pick on which one you want, which one you favor. I want to give a little more time, obviously, to figure out where we're going with this. I would probably tend to lean to the icon's idea as the compromise between the two models, because I don't quite believe the GFS is overwhelming of cold air. I also don't quite believe the European's idea of what it does with dropping the trough so far to the west. So let's back up now. Let's go we're going to go to present time, and I think we'll switch to the GFS model, and we'll also use the radar. Here we go, and run it back to the beginning, so we'll follow how it plays. Now, we do have some weather going on tonight in and around the Great Lakes. We do have some showers on the radar. You can see them here moving out of Iowa, northwestern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, moving east. Small area, weak disturbance. There's actually a weak little frontal boundary that's going to be moving into New England on Friday that will weaken and fall apart. So that's what that moisture is about. And of course, you're starting to see the precip in Colorado and back over into Wyoming, snow that is dropping southeastward from there. The west right now is pretty quiet. It's also very quiet in the east, and there's the last of the rain now moving out of Maine finally after pouring all day long. So our high is sitting over West Virginia. That's where you got all your frost advisories up because of the clear skies and light winds. The high moves offshore tomorrow. Now here's your snow dropping southward out of Colorado into New Mexico and northern Texas. That includes Amarillo and down to about Lubbock. You also are starting to see that Gulf moisture in the western Gulf tomorrow, pushing up into Louisiana and Mississippi by the time we get to Friday. And here's our Gulf low for Friday that starts to run northeastward. There is a high that is up in New England on Saturday morning right here. So we are setting up. There's a pinched off warm front that's setting up here for the coast. So you're getting that marine air that it's going to start forcing its way southwestward and damming in. The question is it going to be able to get dislodged? And that's going to be tough to figure. Some rain on the GFS. The GFS seems to be rather zealous in bringing rain up Saturday afternoon into New Jersey and Pennsylvania. That might be a bit of a rush. The air is dry, so we might see that get eroded to a certain extent. And then it really blossoms, this rain area, during the early morning hours on Sunday throughout much of the east, swings it eastward Sunday morning, and then by 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon, the rain is offshore from New York City, Philadelphia westward. It's done, but it is still going on, and going on in a big way in New England, and another potential for some heavy rain up in Maine. So just bear that in mind. You folks up there have had quite a bit of rain in the last week or so, your flooding threshold may wind up being low. Then that goes out, and now we start to set up the GFS's view of the overwhelming of cold air. And as a result, you've got another front with another low riding along it that brings some rain here on Tuesday up the coast and moves out. And then finally that cold air comes in, and you are seeing some lake effect snows if the GFS is correct. It has to be correct to bring that upper low, has to go there in that direction in order to produce some of those lake effect snows that you see around the lakes Tuesday night and Wednesday. And then gradually during the day on Wednesday, you're actually seeing some lake effect snow showers in northwest PA, northern Ohio, southwestern New York, and then up east of Lake Ontario as well. And then, of course, the high just kind of settles in after that, and we're cold for Halloween and a chilly day for the start of the month of November. Then the high moves out, and then by this time we're already at day 10 on the long range. So who knows if that's the case, what we're going to be. We have to resolve the issue for next week because, with regards to that trough, I'm just not convinced that either model has the correct view of this. Let me bring the NAM up for a moment because the NAM does just develop a low, a distinct separate tropical low. Well, let's call it some kind of hybrid or subtropical low here in the southwest Gulf during tomorrow. Actually, this is Friday morning, but you start to see the seedling come up tomorrow in the southwest Gulf. And it actually does develop that into a 999 low with the isobars are pretty tight. The NAM certainly suggests that this could become a subtropical system of some nature. It was pretty good with Nestor, so you want to give it a little bit of faith here. Where it might be incorrect is that it keeps it as a separate entity. You've got the Gulf moisture and the upper trough swinging that rain up into Arkansas and Tennessee and Kentucky. It keeps the hybrid system, let's call it. It keeps it kind of separate. The global models aren't really showing that. The global models basically just kind of absorb it all into one mess, but the NAM's keeping it separate. The NAM also has a bit of a different look with regards to the system. It takes it pretty far to the left, pretty far west, and that would certainly mean that there's no rain reaching the coastal areas on Saturday. Most of the rain is confined to northwest PA, and you actually get a much heavier rainfall back over into the up northern Ohio Valley and back over into the lower lakes, rather than seeing it further to the east. And it takes that mostly straight north. So if you want to believe this, if you believe the NAM, there would be no rain of consequence here through Saturday night into Sunday morning. And the reason why the NAM is doing this is how it sees it sees the upper air for this weekend a bit differently, in that it has this shortwave trough lifting way to the left. Okay, take a look at. I'll mark it off. Here's the NAM's view. You've got this upper low sitting in southern Wisconsin. Okay, the ridge line along the East Coast is right to about New York City. Remember, on the GFS, we had the ridge line was over New York City Saturday morning. This is 18 hours later. The NAM has got a much stronger ridge along the East Coast. And what happens? Well, it goes this is as far out as it goes. It goes so far to the left. But here's your GFS for the same time frame. And the GFS, the shortwave trough is actually right here. This is the GFS's shortwave trough. The NAM is this line right there, okay? And the ridge line on the GFS is way up. I should probably do that in different colors. I think that would work better. So we'll do that in blue. So here's your ridge line on the GFS in blue, okay? Your shortwave trough on the GFS also in blue, compared to the NAM. Look at those are big differences in terms of a forecast. GFS ridgeline, your rain is all in here. Okay, if you go with the NAM, then you're talking about the rain shield being much further to the west and being up in this area. So not only do we have long range differences on these models, but we have short range differences as well. And the NAM is actually trying to argue that the trough dropping into the northern plains is having impact on lifting that short wave up much further to the west. Here's the NAM's upper air. Okay, so if we look at the NAM upper air, it swings that trough down into the northern plains and actually picks up the system out of Texas and takes it northeastward. That's a huge difference from the GFS and the European, which both models do not do that. The European shortwave, for example, is about where the GFS is. Okay, let me just erase this because I'm using two different maps, two different regions here with what I drew. But here's the European shortwave, and remember the NAM is back in Wisconsin. It has that trough in the west, and it keeps it completely separate. And the GFS is also the same with that, like the European, where it actually has an even weaker shortwave coming into the east, with the trough swinging down into the west. And the GFS is a little further along with that trough in the west. So we've got differences in the models going into this weekend. I probably will shy away from the NAM with what it's doing, responding to that upper low being picked up by the trough coming down into the plains and Rockies, and go with the globals with this, because I think that really does make more sense, that it would be a separate entity. We're already seeing the beginnings of the moisture feeding down into the Gulf of Mexico. So I think it just kind of argues all the way around the way things have been happening lately, that this thing would get ejected out to the northeast or the east-northeast, and rather than moving to the north-northeast. I just don't think the northeast motion is one that makes a lot of sense at this point. Taking a look at just the rainfall that is, at least from the standpoint of the GFS, you're looking at those big rains in the Gulf, also some 2 to 4 inch rains in parts of Mississippi, Tennessee, into Kentucky. And then you've got those patches of 2 inch plus rains in Pennsylvania, upstate New York, in through New England, and also down to about the 1 inch line on this run is further south, down to about New York City and northern New Jersey, and lesser amounts as you go to the south. Not as much rain in southern New Jersey down into eastern Virginia. We'll have a little fun tonight, so we'll look at, obviously the snow maps are kind of useless here in the longer term because of what's happening, but we do have the short-term stuff to look at, and I'll bring up, since the issues are going to be with parts of, which map is the best one to use here? I guess the west. We'll see enough of Texas in here. So this is snowfall in the next, well, first of all, here's what's going on for tonight. So through 24 hours and through 30 hours and 36, the GFS actually has some 4 inch plus amounts in North Texas, and of course 4 to 8 inch amounts in Colorado, up to about, it looks like Denver might be just kind of on the edge of that 4 inch plus. And in terms of the next 10, the longer term, again, just for laughs, the colder GFS does actually show snows coming into Montana, Wyoming, the western Dakotas, the northern lakes, and then of course you see some of the lake effect that pops up. Again, this assumes that the GFS is correct with the big trough moving into the east and overwhelming everybody with cold air. We don't know if that's the case. I did notice that the Canadian through 10 days is maybe a bit more like the European in wanting to drop the trough further to the west, at least initially. But eventually it does produce a little bit of lake effect action, probably later in late next week. But who knows? Again, this is all conjecture on the maps part. The snow maps, as I've said many times, they're really pretty useless, especially with the numbers. Once you get outside, you don't really even need it. You don't really need it in terms of trying to forecast. You can do it the old-fashioned way. Figure out how much liquid is going to fall. Take into account your topography, wind direction, everything else, and figure it out manually by hand. I think you come out with much better numbers that way. The really fast. I'm going to bring up weather.gov We can just at least see what they're doing out there. And let's pull up. All right, so we've got Denver is in this winter weather advisory. 4 miles southwest of Colorado Springs. It's 38 with light rain and snow with and they call it breezy. But we jump up north. They didn't really do very much here. Oh, here's a snowfall map that they have here for their particular zone. Colorado Springs, they're going 6 to 8. Is that I got to get new glasses. Walsenburg. If Ruthless Goat is on, please correct me if I'm wrong. 8 to 12. Alamosa 2 to 3. Trinidad, is that Trinidad? 8 to 12. And then you go further east to Springfield, 2 to 3. Let me see what they got on the Denver. We'll go up one more office here on the Denver office. This is the Pueblo office. Here's Boulder. And they don't see... there's their snow map. There was their snow map. So they mentioned a few places here. So for Denver, for example, they're going expected snowfall of 2. For high-end snowfall range is 6. Boulder 3. Breckenridge 5. Castle Rock 6. Lyman 2. The high-end snowfall amounts are basically double what the low-end snowfall amounts are. And let's just check North Texas for laughs. And we'll see what they're doing. All right, I went to Kansas instead. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I'm in Albuquerque. Okay. All right, let's try this. Let's go up one north. Back to Pueblo. Southeast. And this takes me back into... here we are at Amarillo. So... they're going for Amarillo. I'll just pull up their forecast to see what they're saying for them. 67 right now in Amarillo. This is like snow in March in the area in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England in later March, when you could be in the 60s and low 70s one day and have snow and temperatures in the 20s the next. But they're going, they're at 67 right now, a low of 34 tonight, and a high of only 35 tomorrow and 26 for tomorrow night. But by the time we get to Saturday, it's back to 65 at Amarillo. All right, I did pull up the Siberian snow cover map because we are at October 23rd, and I said 10 days ago that after we looked at the first 10 days that this was probably a good point to do it again. I would point out that at day 10 we were right here, and we went into a stall. Okay, snow cover rate of growth actually decreased, then hit a bottom right around the 19th, and over the last the 18th, and then the last 4 days we've kind of spiked up back near the top, and the forecast, if you want to believe it. We look at the GFS for that. We can take a look at that really fast here. And I'll bring up the snowfall forecast map for the next 10 days. And that'll take us into the first days of November. So we're getting, right at the very end of the range for this particular indicator. Please bear in mind, this is one thing of many things that you can look at to try and get a leg up on, it almost seems fruitless really, but anyway, snow lovers are going to look at whatever's going to give them a handle. And the snow cover growth over the next 10 days, over the next 2 weeks actually, across Eurasia is pretty substantial, particularly on the western flank. I should also show you that I looked at this afternoon. I was looking at Europe. And our friends in England and the southern half of Ireland actually picks up a fair amount of snow in the short term, okay? There is a system coming in with some colder air that's dropping from Greenland and Iceland southeastward, and it is showing some snow beginning tonight. Why did it do that? Hold on. Sorry about that. Hang on. But here we go. This is under 384. Let me go back to the 0 here. But if we look at Europe, there it is on the short range. Starting on Friday, Thursday night, Friday, some snow in the southern part of Ireland, and actually some fairly substantial snow being indicated in southwestern Ireland and in a couple of patches there up in northern England and into Scotland. So what's happening is that you do have some colder air that is getting forced southeastward from Greenland. There's a low, there's a very strong low. You see that 978 low that's north of Scotland, and you're getting cold air being pulled down behind it from Greenland and Iceland, and it's pushing into Ireland. And there's a second low that's coming up from the south, well off the coast of Spain, that's shooting this arm of moisture northeastward toward England. And on the northern fringe of that, where you've got that cold air, you're getting some snow, and there's actually that dark blue heavy snow between 48 and 60 hours during Friday night. So very interesting that it's doing that. Wonder if it's going to verify or not. There's a pretty chilly high that settles over northwest of Scotland early next week, and that keeps things rather chilly there across Ireland and England. Just for laughs, so just pull up some temperatures there and see what they got. But look at this. They got these pockets here with temperatures below freezing for at the end of October. That is that's pretty impressive. So that's actually that's rather cold air. You're talking about 0 Celsius, 1 Celsius, so temperatures in the low 30s, while you've got this potential for some snow here. And even in the middle of next week, of course, we're talking about that high. It's pretty cold here. You got temperatures in the upper 20s and low 30s for over 6 a.m. on Monday. It's in the upper 20s to low 30s through much of Scotland and into England, except the extreme south. It does eventually warm up into near 50 in southeastern England by noon on Monday, but it's still pretty cold going into Monday night and Tuesday. Very chilly indeed for this time of year. So little hints are showing up in places with regards to the upcoming winter season. Just everybody has to be patient, because we're we got a ways to go yet. We're only into the end of October. So we're going to have fun trying to figure out where this is all going to go with the system for the weekend and the system for next week. So on the chat board, nice to see everybody here on board tonight. The chairman is back and his mom is feeling better with Scott Briller. We're all very happy to see to hear about that, and speedy recovery. Let's hope. Let it all continue. Izzy D, a flake of snow in Lakewood until January. Just knowing how perfect things have to be to get snow in the past few years, definitely didn't start until January 10th or so. Every winter is different. Every setup going into it is different. I would just say, try not to fall too much on the general statements in regards to when your first snow may or may not be. When the setup is right, the setup is right. And sometimes, you get those years where you get surprises in December, or maybe even sometimes in late November if the setup is there. But most years it's not until you get to the latter part of December and early January. I will agree with that. But I always go into these things with a very open mind and just let the maps and the pattern tell me where things are going to go, and not stress over the long range stuff, which is so theoretical and so far out with so much variability that's in there. Who knows? 10 traces of measurable snowfall for New York City anyway in October in 150 years. It does happen. Oh, Mr. Brewer has hit Super Chat tonight. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it greatly. By the way, I should mention, for those of you in New Jersey, I am tentatively trying to work something out for an appearance in Bayonne, at the Bayonne Library. They reached out. The library didn't, but someone who can set it all up has reached out to me and asked for a bunch of dates. So we're going to see if we can try to work something out. It probably won't be until sometime in December or January, but or perhaps even a bit later than that. But I'll let you know as soon as I know. And for you Long Islanders, I do have something coming up in February at the Sachem Library. I think it's in the early part of February. I don't remember the date offhand, but once I get that finalized, I will let you know. Johnny Quest, Super Chat tonight. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it greatly. That's 2 espressos and a cigar for me for the drive home tonight. So if anybody, any chance it combines Paul Roman into a few snowflakes for you in Ulster County, Paul, if that cold trough swings eastward and overwhelms like the GFS shows for you up in the Catskills, and for Chuck Cardillo, yeah, why not? Wouldn't be at all surprised. But we've got to resolve the weekend, and we've got to resolve, more importantly, we've got to resolve how this is all going to come out for later next week. Keith James, will the cold air next week bring the first frost to Paramus and Bergen County? I think it will. I think either way, there's enough cold air, whichever way it comes out, that we're going to wind up seeing areas that have not seen, in my local area, that have not seen their first frosts of the year, may finally get them with the system, with the developments for later next week. Izzy D, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. And William Hubert, thank you very much for down payment for my new car. I was telling the guys before, thank you. My days at FiOS are down to 12. So I drive a 2003 Toyota Corolla that has 289,100 miles on it. It's going in tomorrow for its annual inspection and oil change. And I was hoping that I would get to 300 before I retired from doing regular TV. But since we're ending in 12 days, I'm not going to do 10,000 miles in 12 days, obviously. But I would love to get 300,000 miles on that thing. Knock on wood. You do your oil change. If you got, those of you with cars, well, everybody's got a car for the most part. Although a lot of the younger folks don't. They do a lot of Uber stuff. But do your oil changes on time. Do your routine maintenance. I mean, really do your oil changes on time and do your routine maintenance, and your car will go a long, long way. Christopher Alley, hi to you. Robert Brown, good to see you on board tonight. Of course, Mr. Chuck from the Catskills, Chuck Cardillo, Robert Woods, Erica Baker. No severe weather for you, Erica. Oh, by the way, speaking of severe weather, I should mention that tomorrow, hang on, where are you? So SPC does have a marginal risk of severe weather over in central Texas, and a larger area of general thunderstorms developing there, and also some general thunderstorms in southern and the eastern part of Florida, away from the west coast. So just to point that out. So that's not a surprise with all that tropical moisture that is being indicated there. So Robert Woods, wait till later next week to get some colder air in here. This again, by the way, it's transient this time of year. It's the end of October, beginning of November. So don't expect, if it does get chilly or cold, it doesn't, it lasts for a couple of days and then moves out. And also, as I said earlier, it's relative to the time of year. So if we get a day or so next week, late next week, where temperatures don't get out of the 40s, that's cold for late October. Had to take a little swig of water there. A vertically stacked low, Erica Baker says, a vertically stacked low is one that occurs at the levels of the atmosphere at the same region or place. Correct. So in other words, if we were looking to look at all that maps, the surface low, the low at 5,000 feet, the 850 millibar low, the low at 10,000 feet, the 700 millibar low, the 500 millibar low, they would all be very, very close to each other, almost one on top of each other. You don't get that too often. Oftentimes the surface low is usually south and east of where the upper features are, but in certain situations, particularly in strong, intense storms where the upper low attempts to capture the surface low, you wind up with something that is vertically stacked. Charles Gall, Mr. Rayo is fine. He's here tonight, but he's been having, he's still having voice problems with the bad head cold that he's had. Although Mrs. Rayo baked some incredibly delicious chocolate chip cookies, I must say. And I had 2 of them today, and they were terrific. So he hasn't been able to sit through the live stream because he has to keep his voice okay for doing the TV side. But I think by the time I get back to work here on Tuesday, we'll do a show together. Because he better have his throat be 100% by then. He did sound much better today, by the way, and I will tell him that my YouTube audience has been asking for him. Peter Bicker, it looks like the models are slowing down the arrival of rain until later Saturday night. That's correct. I think that is definitely going to be the case. And nice to see you on board, by the way. Timothy Veltman. Timothy did bring up last night, and by the way, I do appreciate this. If I throw out a stat and it's wrong, please correct it. I really appreciate that you guys, stay on top of these things, because I used to be really good with remembering events and dates, and unfortunately, as I am about to turn 61, that doesn't quite come as easy as it used to. Now, I'm trying to find, where'd you go, Timothy? Oh, because I responded to it. I got to find your post, but you did put up the correct dates with regarding the last landfalling hurricane, and in the U.S. And of course, now that I'm trying to get to the information, my page is not loading. But we have Hurricane Kate. You reminded me of Hurricane Kate, and let me see. Hang on, folks. Be patient. Stephen Franco's not on tonight, but he was asking about the Siberian snow cover. So let's see. Going back to last night's live stream, I'm looking through all the comments, and I did see it. Let me try it this way. Maybe that's why it's not there, because you messaged it to me, and that's why. I got it now. Okay, so as Timothy Veltman points out, in the Atlantic Basin, the latest landfalling hurricane of any category was Hurricane Kate on November 22nd, 1985. On the Pacific side, it was Hurricane Iwa, IWA, in Hawaii on November 24th, but no year was given. So it looks like it's certainly possible to have an impact for another month, but climatology says it does get less and less likely. I think Anthony Orr pointed out that as far as a Category 3 is concerned, that would have been that Tampa hurricane back in 1921, and Hurricane Wilma, which was also late in the month of October. When was that, in 2005, I believe, or 2008? I always forget. Either way, it was in the early 2000s. All right, 1982. Thank you so much, Timothy. So that was 1982 for Iwa. So I'm good. So we got that figured out. Izzy has his uncle indicator for the winter, who is seeming to point out that at least for the I-95 corridor, we'll assume his forecast, Izzy, because you're located in where you are in New Jersey, that we're talking the I-95 corridor, not necessarily north and west of there, but he's going for a rather subdued winter for the I-95 corridor. And yes, Mark Gladfelter, I would go with that. I'll say 61 years young. Physically I feel great, but it is it's the thought process that is impacted, and the memory process that is impacted through as one reaches the second and eventually the third plateau, as Jackie Gleason would say. Yes, Izzy, I did take that 2016 Toyota Corolla in the snowstorm. I have driven in virtually every snowstorm that has occurred in the last 25, 30 years, okay? Because they always made me work on those days. And finally, I'm going to have a winter where I won't have to drive anymore. It was when I worked at Pix from 96 to 2005, for whatever reason, it wasn't always the case, but a lot of the snowstorms happened around weekends, and I worked weekends. So, but there were a few that happened during the weekdays, which really made things a whole lot easier for me. Okay, so Erica is calling out that it is dinner time, and yes, go have your dinner. We've had a nice long live stream. It's 8:03 Eastern time. So anything you've watched today with regards to satellites and radars, just always remember that it's dated, and you want to get your local latest weather information, just make sure you go to weather.gov. Again, just a reminder, you've got the Meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app on Google Play and on the App Store. You've got the Angry Weatherman, Angry Ben's weather app. Both apps are free, so download them. They are, you get your local forecast and current conditions. They will default to your own location. Plus, you can read all the stuff that I write about weather throughout the day, and you get notifications too. And you can even watch the live streams on there if you missed the live stream on YouTube. Patreon for you serious weather geeks, and for those of you who need good weather information to make some decisions, get on the Patreon platform. It's just $2 a month. And by the way, that really helps me do all this other stuff, the apps, building the apps and maintaining them and having them on a server, and having Google Play and the App Store and all the rest of it. So it really does offset the cost of all of this. So it helps greatly when you hit Super Chat, or if you're part of Patreon. And one other way I'll mention before I say goodnight is that you can shop my Amazon link, which is, give it to you in 1 second. First of all, let me just put up the Patreon link for those of you that are interested. It is patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and I will put the link here on the chat board. No obligation, obviously. And for those of you who shop on Amazon, now this is an easy way, because you know what? It doesn't cost you a dime to shop via my link, and Amazon will throw me back a little bit of coin in the process. Not out of your pocket, out of theirs. And we're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. So thanks all of you for all that you've done. Have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow morning on Weather in 5, and tomorrow evening on the regular live stream. We'll shoot for 7 o'clock Eastern time. Good night, everybody.